It's time to take inventory. Pre-draft, post the first wave of free agency. We'll go through it here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. You can catch us over on YouTube at the Locked On Jaguars page. Make sure when you get over there, you hit like, subscribe, and then hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. Also, wherever you find your podcast that you listen to audio-wise, make sure you tap into that location every single day to make sure you don't miss an episode. And today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. That's right, FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And shout out to the everydayers that join me here every single day. And you can be one if you join me every single day as well. All right, let's get right to it. We're going to take inventory of the depth chart to see what the Jacksonville Jaguars have if they were to go line up, and it is not official. If they were to go to line up right now today to play a game, who would they have in the lineup and how would they be? Like I said, this is not official on the Jaguars site at Jaguars.com. They do not have an official depth chart, but this is our depth chart. We're going to partially use one that is posted online, but even that one has them running a 3-4. We know they're probably not going to line up like that anymore with Ryan Nielsen as the defensive coordinator, so we'll take a stab at it ourselves. We're going to analyze it, see how they would fare, and I'll tell you right now, they're a better team now than they were at the end of last year. If they weren't, then we need to go over there and seriously, whether Shah Khan did it or not, we need to go over there seriously and just take over the building. I say that playfully. They are better, but everybody else is better too. What are their needs, short and long term, or long and short term, whichever one you want them to prioritize? We'll go through that in segment 3. But let's go take it at the top right now. Look, the Jaguars are better. Just the signing of Mitch Morse alone makes them a better team, because a lot of their problems was the fact that by the time they hiked the ball last year or whenever the snap count came in, people were already in their business. You know what I mean when I say that? All up in places they weren't supposed to be, and that hindered both the run and Trevor's timing. And I don't want to push that aside too much, because we get caught up in everything else that we're talking about. And I think sometimes people believe that I don't think that was the number one priority. And that is an absolute misjudging of what I do here every day. It is. It's my job to talk about everything that they do and some things that they don't do. And I know at times folks, I hear, man, I guess you got to talk about something. Yeah, pretty much I do. So it's usually what they do or what they don't do, what they commit and what they omit. So what we're going to discuss now, as far as the center position, I know it's going to change a whole lot of stuff. The main thing is going to change is Trevor Lawrence isn't going to have to keep looking over his back. If you watch TV and you know Luke Fortner couldn't block anybody, what do you think the dude receiving the ball from him thought? Can he get over that anxiety, if he has any, to where he knows he's going to get hit? He's always mentally preparing himself to get hit. What about the running backs? As soon as they get the ball, they know they're used to somebody already standing there. As soon as they get it, they open. Just imagine you opening your door and there's a grizzly bear there every morning. And at some point, you get used to it and you learn how to move around that grizzly bear. What happens when he's not there? And it's like, whoo, I'm not used to this, right? So that's one of the things that we really have to focus on and pay attention to. And that's why I said the signing of Mitch Morse by itself makes them a better team. I think Gabe Davis gives them another element of something they have a little bit in Evan Ingram, but there's nothing wrong with having two of them. And that is big-bodied 6'2.5", 6'3" guys running around, giving Trevor Lawrence a bigger and better target to hit. And I think sometimes when people think about height, they think about jump ball ability, like a Mike Williams or a T. Higgins. Well, that's not the only thing. And I don't think either one of those guys I just mentioned is what you would consider a jump ball wide receiver or a catch radius wide receiver. But having a bigger body and giving Trevor something to see more clearly obviously can help. And then guys that can avoid. I've criticized Evan in the past for running around stuff, things that he should run through, and I think Gabe Davis is one of those tough guys that's going to help with that element and having those two guys on the field at the same time. They could also help Zay Jones, who, if he's still on the roster and still considered the third receiver, it could absolutely help him if he stays healthy too. So I do believe those two additions on offense have truly, truly, truly changed the functionability of the offense with Trevor Lawrence and the running backs. I know everybody's gonna be y'all be hitting breaks. Y'all think y'all gonna take a day off. Y'all, you say it's April Fool and Wig is on here giving Trent Baalke credit. I am. I absolutely am. Some things are obvious, right? Some things are obvious, and y'all act like Trent. I think Trent is over there blindfolded. I don't. I just believe that certain guys lead with certain things, and even if you get some things right, there's always going to be some things that you miss because of how you focus and lead with. And the things that Trent does have to be good enough to beat what these other GMs are doing. So that's the only thing that I like to point out a lot. On defense, of course, the Eric Armstead signing is huge. It gives them a really, really good professional NFL starting, high caliber starting guy with a big body that when you blend him in with the other parts that are already there, Devon Hamilton, I don't know if y'all know this, is not a small man. When healthy, that size really shows up on tape. He's 6'4", 335 pounds, and he ain't fat. So he's kind of big, but you know what I'm saying. He ain't sloppy with it. He's a 3-down player who can really, really move. You add him, you add Eric Armstead to that inside, along with now Roy Robertson Harris, who I believe is your third defensive lineman as opposed to a starter, with Josh Allen and Trayvon. You are very, very formidable up front. The linebackers are set 1, 2, and 3, of course, with Foyesade Oluokun being extended. Young Devin Lloyd hopefully continue to make a rise up. And then Chad Muma, who's your depth, regardless of whether or not you don't ever see a path to him starting here in Jacksonville unless something else bad happens. He's still right now the depth on your team, and I think there's a pretty good depth guy. But the signing that I want everyone to pay attention to is Ronald Darby, because Ronald Darby gives you an outside presence that is, of course, extremely familiar with Chris Richard, who's a defensive back coach, is going to really, really, really help this football team with toughness, with length, with all of those things. That is going to really, really, in my opinion, show up and help this football team more than you can even imagine. He's a man-to-man, and he'll say it, man. I'm a man-to-man corner. He's tough. He's going to get out. He's going to tackle. He's going to do all of those things. Now, watch this. He was also, everyone that just talks about Doug, he's familiar with Doug Peterson as well. Played for the Eagles 2017 to 2019. So those are the years. Doug Peterson is very, very familiar. It's not just with Chris Richard from last year. It is Doug Peterson. So I think Doug Peterson understands his workflow, knows who he is, and those things are very, very important when you get down to it, because you have to know how guys are going to move. Remember all of that talk about bringing in people that could be leadership and bring in and import leadership from somebody else? Well, Doug knows what this is firsthand. This isn't that. This is, I'm going to bring somebody in I'm familiar with. So now you have Eric Armstead and Ronald Darby. I like Darnell Savage too. So we're going to discuss all of those players, but mainly the thing we're going to focus on is we're going to look at them. We're going to lay it out and tell you who we think is going to start. We're going to go through the depth chart. We're going to analyze it. Maybe even have thoughts and minds of teams within a division and give you an idea of what they may need in the draft, short and long term. We're going to make sure we do that for you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Ain't no April Fool's Day. We don't do that kind of stuff. I ain't playing around with people. I got you for 30 minutes, so I got to make it count. I'm not going to sit here and do any jokes like that. Y'all know we don't play like that anyway. But I am going to go through the depth chart with you, and I'm going to make sure we have a clear understanding of where I feel the team needs to make additions. We'll do it here on Locked On Jaguars in just a second. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel is the absolute truth, man. And if you're like me, guess what I had yesterday? That's right. I thought NC State was at least going to get to the Final Four, and they did. Boy, and if you thought the same thing, you already know what I'm telling you. Cha-ching, because it happened. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $200. You can use to bet the tourney, Major League Baseball, NBA, and the NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, back here on Locked On Jaguars. We ain't say back because we ain't gone anywhere, right? I know you guys are hanging in there with me, listening to that beautiful, beautiful live read. But guess what? It's time to get live right now and talk about the roster. Let's do the fun thing. Let's start with the defense. I just chronicled the player-to-player front four for Jacksonville, including linebackers, right? I used 3. Then I think they'll be in 4-2-5 more than not, especially with Derrick Henry out of the division. But for the most part, we mentioned the 3 linebackers. Now we'll mention 5 DBs. Starting out with Ronald Darby, who we've already mentioned, and then Tyson Campbell. What this gives you, if you're Jacksonville, you don't have a size deficiency at one spot. Shout out to Darius Williams, who's a real good player, and he played bigger than his size, but he was 5'9", 5'10". Ronald Darby, 6 feet, 6'1". Longtime player. I followed him a lot in college because, of course, I'm a Florida State Seminole supporter. But the thing with Ronald Darby is that toughness. I think the person that's going to learn more from Ronald Darby than anybody is Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell is this team's Marlon Humphrey, right? And what I mean by that, I ain't saying he's as good as Marvin Humphrey, but when you think about how he plays and who he plays like, he may not be as good with his back to the ball as Marlon Humphrey, but he's about that same size. He gives you a lot of that same skill set. And the reason why I mentioned that is because Chris Richard had both of those guys. He had Marlon Humphrey and Ronald Darby last year, and now he's here in Jacksonville. And I think it gives you dudes that can really, really compete before the snap. Because now you hope the pass rush, because of the scheme and the additional people that you put up front and the continued development of Trayvon Walker, that teams won't have a whole lot of room to be throwing the football right now, right? You got to plant that back foot and let it go, because if you hesitate, there's going to be a Jaguar coming in there around that corner to knock you off for a square. So you need these big physical guys on the outside that can actually provide the kind of competitive toughness that's going to allow those guys get home. And those two give it to you. Now, Darnell Savage in the slot, that must be a purely scout thing. And I'm going to assume that because of his particular traits, that these guys have done their homework and they believe Darnell Savage can be exactly what they want him to be, as opposed to the way Joe Barry had him playing in Green Bay, which was more of a safety in the short area of the middle of the field. That's why I referred to him as a little bit of a box safety, even though that's not what he was. But it seemed like he always dwelled within that 10 to 12 yard range. He's found himself downfield some too, but I think what they're going to ask him to do is challenge that slot from a man-to-man perspective, to be able to guard those first 3 or 4 seconds, to make things hard on the quarterback. Therefore, the quarterback won't have time to throw. So while I question adding 2 DBs in a draft that is full of DBs, I do not question the fact that I think they matched up players with their scheme. How good they are, I don't know. Half of it's getting it right. You gotta have guys that are good, but then you gotta have guys that are good at what you want to do. So I think they've matched up good with what you want to do. How high they do it, at what level they do it, that's a whole nother thing. So in my opinion, that's the depth chart. You'll go Walker, Allen on the edge, of course, with Armstead, Devon Hamilton in the middle. All right. They added a third edge rusher. I think they might still look forward to that a little bit, but I don't want to get ahead of it. The interior of the defensive line, they have 3. Linebacker, they have their 3, even though they're only playing 2 at a time. They have 2 starting corners. They have their nickel. And with Andre Sisco and Antonio Johnson, they have their starters. So I believe anyone that they add in the draft defensively is not going to start on this football team. That's just me. And that's why when folks sit and go corner, 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 and I'm thinking like, it makes sense. And you need a bunch of them. And if they do add a corner, there's going to be competition for that starting spot. Savage is going to start with what they paid him. You got to wonder, you're going to get a nickel, you're going to get a rookie that's going to come out and beat out Ronald Darby, and Darby only has a 1-year deal. Darby's here to make sure that nobody beats him out. He wants to play. Okay? So even if he's your 3rd outside corner, that's still really, really good as long as the guy you draft can really, really play. All right, so let's go over to the offensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball, as we stand today, if they had to go up and line up, would be Mitch Morse at center, thank God, Brandon Sheriff at right guard, Anton Harrison, by the way, who's putting out some of the most ridiculous food takes I've ever seen, but shout out to him. Anton Harrison, who is at right tackle, who could play left, and we'll get back to that. Then you have Ezra Cleveland at left guard, and of course the incumbent Cam Robinson at tackle, your swing offensive lineman. Right now is Walker Little to go along with Luke Fortner. I know everybody wants to get in the weight room. They just want Luke to lift weights all summer. They don't want him to play at all next year. They just want him to lift weights and get stronger, right? And you got Cooper Hodges coming back off of an injury, and I think that's big because that's a guy that everybody was looking at last year saying, whoo, maybe he can turn into something. But right now he's right where he's supposed to be, and that's in the developmental stages because Sheriff may not last a whole lot longer, a couple of years. So that's a good spot. In the backfield, it's the same thing as it's been. There's Travis Etienne, there's Tank Bigsby. And of course, there's my man, everybody loves the backup running backs in this situation. Dearness Johnson. So the thing that I feel about running backs, and before we get to long and short-term needs, is you saw the running backs get paid. Teams are going to start running the ball a little bit more and depending on more than one person. So the Jaguars are going to, I think, involve those running backs a lot. Remember Doug Peterson, the year he won the Super Bowl, 3 running backs had multiple touches in the first quarter of the Super Bowl against New England. So I think he really, really likes to mix it up and give teams different looks. Wide receiver, we mentioned it, Christian Kirk starting in your slot with Gabe Davis and Zay Jones being your 2 and your 3, with Evan Ingram as your starter at tight end. Once again, if we look at it that way, I don't know where you're going to get a starter from in the draft this year. And that's why we're about to talk about long and short term in the draft. Has Trent Baalke set this whole thing up to really and truly draft best player available? Will that player have an impact next year besides just competition? Or will the Jaguars decide to trade up a little bit, go up and get more of an impact player, or trade back and get a whole bunch more guys that could start helping build that depth on that football team with an eye towards the future? Of course, we will let you know what we think here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, if you are watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all that shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel, sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. More analysis about the current state of the Jacksonville Jaguars and what they might do in the draft. And we'll get to that here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me tell you something, man. Everybody goes through life because life is always lifing, right? And the thing is you have to figure out ways to get yourself started again. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time to get things figured out, or more time to devote to the things that we love. Well, BetterHelp can help you do that. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of that. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on, all one word, LOCKED. And thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. Earlier, we took a little bit of inventory, went through the depth chart. If the Jaguars had to go out and play a game today, right now. So now the draft is coming up, right? Long or short-term needs. The Jaguars have been a best player available team for a long time. Best player available can mean a lot of things, as everyone knows. It could mean just taking the dude that you think is going to have the better career. But remember earlier, we talked about having guys that fit, and the allocation of resources is also very important when it comes to that. It depends if you're looking long or short term. Ideally, you get production out of guys that you pick on day one. Guys that you pick on day one should be players that actually fall into both, because everybody can use good players, right? So you get good players that are ready to come in and at least play some sort of a role. And I think sometimes people get it twisted when you say ready to contribute right away. That means, oh, that guy's got to come in right now and be all he can be for his whole career. No, that's not what it is. Sometimes 2 or 3 years down the line, when they hit their peak at the right time, right before they're starting to need a new contract, is when you actually get a glimpse of what they could really, really, truly be. Prior to that, they could just be guys that just are ready to play and make a contribution. And a lot of times, what that depends on is the maturity of the player that you draft, the staff, and what their goals are, whether or not they already have other players that are willing to do and to do it in a competitive way, to force those rookies to really, really reach down deep and find what they have. And then veterans that are already here, that are good locker room guys that are able to show the type of leadership that can honestly say, hey, man, take my job if you want it, but understand if you can't take it, that don't mean we don't like you. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing about training camp is you got 53 jobs and you got 90 people. And of those 53 people, probably 42 of them or 43 of them are very, very secure contractually to what they're going to be able to contribute. And then you got about 20 people trying to find out if they're going to be one of those 10 people that are left on the roster, those 10 or 12 people. Well, the guys that get drafted on day one, they're there. The guys that get drafted on day two, they're there. What and where will you play and how much will you contribute depends on whether or not you're good enough. And teams that are almost competitive, like the Jaguars, are sitting there at 9 wins. That's where you really have to get people that understand that they're trying to not just be status quo. They want to lift this thing up to a whole nother level. And right now, with the way that this roster is constructed, with the Jaguars picking at 17, I think there's going to be a plethora of things that they could do. We talked about edge rush, and I'm going to get to that because every single time you turned around for the last 2 years, people wanted more and more edge rush. And now you got Josh Allen, who hopes to get a long-term extension. You got Trayvon Walker, who is ascending, and both of those guys have shown you how good they can be. Do we go for the kill? Do we say, to heck with it, if Jarrett versus there or the Latu kid from UCLA is sitting there, do we just snatch him up, throw him out there, and now we got sacks coming from all over the place, and then we can address corner in the second round? Very, very smart. If they did that, I wouldn't have a problem with it. And nobody's going to care whether or not a dude is starting or not if he can play, right? What if they say, no, man, we're going to take the corner that's left. We're going to take this athletic kid out of Clemson or one of those shutdown corners, Terrion Arnold or Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, if they're sitting there, because we don't think Max Melton is going to make it to 48. So we'll go and address that now. And then we'll come back in the second round and maybe we can get Marshawn Nealon to be a guy who can fit in on that line. If they don't sign Josh Allen to a contract extension, that might be something that they do. I'm dead serious. And play Josh Allen one more year on the franchise tag and see if this kid can play. And now you have another kid and Trayvon sitting there and you go, Josh Allen, thank you for all you've done, but we got to go ahead and move on because now we got to give Trevor all of this money. Also, very, very smart, although they will get crushed and killed for the idea of Josh Allen not having a contract extension. That'll last as long as that. If whoever they get in the first or second round this year has shown or shows just a little bit that they're able to do whatever they can do to show we'll be fine without Josh Allen. And I know that's hard for some people to believe, but good teams have a way of figuring that out and doing that. Baltimore's done it. I use Kansas City a lot, but they're not the only ones that have said, you know what? I'll give you a perfect example. Jonathan Grenard played well last year, but you know what? Houston said, we can upgrade a little bit. And they did with Danielle Hunter, right? So you're always looking to make sure that you can put the best players on the field. Notice I haven't said anything about the offense yet because I know this is not what people want to hear. The Jaguars are going to be in position to draft a really, really good offensive lineman in round 1 if they want to. And if they do that, I can't imagine that they do that and that dude doesn't play early. So if they do that, that could mean a move for Cam Robinson or a move for Walker Little. And then let the new guy come in and push. And the second somebody gets hurt, like Cam Robinson, you put him in and Cam never gets his job back. Those things could work. The versatility that they also have, and I'm giving Balky credit for this too, is that dude doesn't have to be a left tackle candidate because Anton Harrison is already on the roster and he can play left tackle in a pinch. But once you move Anton Harrison over to left tackle, he has to stay there. So that's why some of this versatility and some of the prospects of having another lineman who's ready to go for the future, I don't have a problem with it because number one goal, and it's been the number one goal to me for 3 years, is to protect number 16, even if you overdo it. You can never have too many Rottweilers around the house, right? So that's a good deal. Wide receiver, if one of them falls to them, the Jaguars might be able to jump right on that too. But at some point, the board is going to dictate that if you can find a wide receiver in the second or third round, and I don't mean find him by luck, I mean to honestly have a list of guys that you know aren't that much far behind the guys that are going to go in the first round, then you can wait. Who will they get if they wait? Will it be Xavier Leggett in the second round? Is it Corley? Is it Malachi Corley? Is it Javon Baker? Is it McMillan out of Washington? There may be a developmental wide receiver. I keep hearing a lot about this Washington kid out of Virginia also that's a really, really good player. Something for you to watch is the value of the Jaguars in the second round getting one of those positions. Here's what I'll tell you before I turn y'all loose on the world and go ahead and start talking about everything that I said here today. Those first 2 rounds must be used, in my opinion, on one of those positions I just mentioned. Corner, edge, wide receiver, tackle. That has to be a priority. In my opinion, if they come out of the draft in the first 2 rounds and both of those picks are not used to address those 2 positions, 2 of those 4, I think it's a problem because I don't think they need to address interior defensive line in round 1 or 2. I do think that looking down the line, it's a need, and you can't have too many of those guys, especially if they're very, very versatile. There will be some folks hanging around in the 3rd round, at the end of the 3rd round, where the Jaguars will have a compensatory pick where they can probably address that. And then in the later rounds, that's where I hope they, in the 4th and 5th, and 6th, that's where I hope they really, really are able to find some guys that they really, really liked up top, that now they can throw a bone at and say, just come into camp and whatever happens, happens. And then one of them turns out to be really, really good. That would be real good for Trent Baalke. It'd be real good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It'd be great for Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence as well. All right. So we have covered the gauntlet today and given a lot of things for discussion. I hope you enjoyed that. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. You guys make sure you take care of each other and continue to do your mock drafts. I hope this was food for thought for you. What will the Jaguars do? Where do they need? Right now, because of the commitments that they've made, you don't see a bunch of glaring holes. So maybe that means going best player available at a position of need now and in the future. Until next time, you guys take care. I'll be here, same channel, same place on Locked On Jaguars.